Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 224, being recorded on October 24th, 2012. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Alan Malventano.
And with us today, we actually have a special guest. We are bringing the Skype count back up to 5, always dangerous territory for us, especially if you saw the pre-show jitters. But we're excited to have on the show Linus Sebastian, that you guys probably know from Linus's Tech Tips.
I wrote boobies on this, but I'm not sure if that's showing up.
It does show up. It does show up. But it's solar,
yes.
So sometimes it's not as bright, you know. It's good to have you, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's actually been a long day, and I've actually been out sick for the last couple days. I don't know if anyone's noticed. I haven't been tweeting at all. I've been sleeping for the last 2 days straight. My voice probably sounds a little weird, but otherwise I'm finally on that upward trend. I'm feeling a lot better, so thanks for having me on the show tonight.
Absolutely. You don't sleep and tweet, I guess?
No, that's quite the talent, and unfortunately I don't have that talent. But that would be fantastic. I mean, you'd be a social media icon if you could like upload videos in your sleep or tweet in your sleep.
I bet there's software that'll do that. I bet there's like sleep monitoring software that will tweet out whether you're an REM or something like that. That sounds like
There's
something
an app
that
for
exists. Yeah. So for maybe some of our viewers or listeners that aren't familiar with what your background is, what Linus Tech Tips is, give us a little bit of history on like when you started it and how long you've been doing it, and basically what you're up to.
Okay, well, actually, that's pretty straightforward. So when I started it and how long I've been doing it are closely related. I started it around 5 years ago, so I've been doing it around 5 years. It all started with the NCIX Tech Tips channel. So at the time, I was working as... What the heck was I even doing? Right. I was doing all the PC configurations for the NCIX.com website. And if you guys aren't familiar with NCIX, as you're probably not, because this is mostly American viewers, but NCIX is, or at the time was, a Canadian-only online retailer. And now there is a U.S. expansion as well. So I was doing all the PC configs, and my whole job was basically to take all this hardware knowledge that I had from years of reading sites like PC Perspective, actually, and Antec, Tom's, all those guys.
BestStarsys.com.
Sure, yes, everyone. Arranging it all into these great configs that I thought people would actually buy. And from there, they went, oh, this guy knows about hardware, so Tiger Direct is doing videos, so we want to do videos. So, Linus, make videos.
Do videos.
And that was actually how the project started. And from there, I sort of decided, well, the key differentiator between what we're doing and what other people are already doing should be that we focus on the educational aspect, in spite of the fact that we are a retailer and ultimately we do want to sell something to every viewer, which is great.
Right.
If we can. But if we try to do a hard sell, like what at the time Tiger Direct would basically go, check out this hard drive. This hard drive has SATA 1 at the time, but has SATA, and it has a great controller on it. And wow, look at this thing. It's only $149.99. And I didn't want to take that approach. I wanted to take more of a holistic approach to sales, where you kind of go, okay, here's this calculator. It's so great because it has boobies, and here's how you can leverage boobies for you.
But did you count the screws on the product?
I'm sorry?
Did you count the screws on the product?
You have to count the screws on the hard drive.
This hard drive contains 6 screws on the front of the drive.
See, I never even made a habit of watching their videos because they were so ridiculous. I mean, I love Logan dearly, and I know he wanted to do the right things, but...
Oh, no, this wasn't them.
No,
Well,
that's Rodney.
I have a
3D
question.
Game Man.
It's interesting that you bring up kind of that knowledge base. Did you get any kind of pushback from vendors because you're on the education side, what you're basically doing is kind of comparing each vendor's products, and so maybe it kind of comes out as you think one is better than the other. Did you ever get any kind of negative feedback or pushback from vendors that NCIX was actually selling?
Well, this is something that you guys have probably encountered in the past. I mean, just like a media program, NCIX as a retailer relies on the partnership and the support of the hardware vendors.
Right.
You can't survive. No company is an island in the same way no man is an island. So there was always that unspoken what I can and cannot say. I was in the middle of, this is a great story, I was in the middle of filming an episode about a video card. It was just an unboxing. And fantastic line. I was like, blah, blah, blah. The packing is so good that not even shipping company X could damage it in transit. And the guy who was filming for me was actually a stand-in for my normal camera guy, and he stopped the camera. He was like, "You can't say bleep like that. Start over." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you're right.
Right.
So it was always that fine line of finding the things that I can say to make my point to the viewer without just, trashing the product, because that's not helpful to anyone. So taking something like a product that I know doesn't work very well, and instead of making a video about how here's what it says it does, I make a video where I demo what it actually does. That way I haven't said anything negative, but I've still focused on educating my viewer, which is that fine line that I hope I found.
Very cool. Now, I know in the video version we have on your lower third your YouTube channel, but that is for people who maybe download this on the audio-only version. It's youtube.com/LinusTechTips, right?
Yes. So that channel started up, it must have been about a year after the NCIX Tech Tips one.
Okay.
And where that came from was a need for more volume. So NCIX Tech Tips was cool, but we were only able to produce, it was just me and the original NCIX cameraman, and we were only able to do around 2 episodes a month. It was very time consuming. We worked really hard, but we both have full-time jobs outside of videos.
Gotcha.
So we were kind of like, okay, we need to find a new format that's simpler and faster and easier so that we can really cover a wide variety of different hardware without spending sort of 8 hours filming everything. So that's where this Linus Tech Tips blog style came from, where we wanted the credibility of yours truly with the personality of yours truly without the production values and the time associated with it
Gotcha.
that came with NCIX Tech Tips. So Linus Tech Tips proved very popular and took off extremely quickly with that quick format, like sort of, here's this thing in less than 6 minutes and everything about it, and oh man, I missed some stuff, but hopefully you guys can figure it out on your own.
Right. Very cool. So Linus is going to hang out with us for the podcast. We'll kind of go through some news. Like I said, man, feel free to butt in with anything if you've got comments. If you feel like any of us are talking too long, feel free to do that as well. So let me find my notes here and jump into the first story. So just recently here at PC Perspective, we started doing networking stuff. And by just recently, I mean this very article. We reviewed a collection of ASUS products, starting with the RT N66U router, USB N66 adapter, and the USB N53 router. And we also looked at some PCI Express-based wireless and adapters as well. And we brought on a new guy, Chris Barbary, who is doing this stuff for us. He actually came into the offices, did a little video introduction in terms of what his background is, what our testing methodology is, and that kind of stuff. And because it is our first article, we don't have a whole lot of comparisons. We did compare the N66U to the Apple dual Airport Extreme dual band, thank you, Ken, router for that. And we look at the features of the RT-N66U, and we actually came away really impressed with the unit. Let me see if I can go through here and show you just some of the performance stuff that we're doing. What's interesting about networking performance, as Chris and I discussed here, is that wired networking, you pretty much always kind of just assume it's going to be fast enough. It wasn't necessarily the case between the Apple and the ASUS router. ASUS had, I think, notably higher throughput on one of the upstream or downstream channels. When we look at the wireless stuff, what you'll see is things like this. So here we're using an Intel Centrino 3x3 adapter integrated into a laptop to connect to the Airport Extreme at 5 gigahertz level, the Asus N66U at 5, and then both of them at 2.4 gigahertz as well. And you can see some interesting differences in their download speeds, averages, maximums, that kind of thing. And what we found is 2.4 gigahertz is actually faster on average than 5 gigahertz in this instance, which kind of goes against what the theory is supposed to be. You look at uploads, though, and we see things change around. There's a ton of great information in this review that Chris wrote up, and it is only the beginning of what we're going to start covering with the wireless networking side of things. He's got 802.11 AC routers we're going to start testing, and we have some, amped wireless, which are supposed to be like these high-powered, high-range adapters and routers that we're going to start testing. So that was something I think we hadn't covered before. I wanted to cover it. I didn't really have the time to do it, and I wanted to find somebody that was capable and competent, and Chris is definitely that. We're lucky to have him on here doing this. Although now that he figured out how much time each of these articles can take, he may have wished he hadn't jumped in so early.
It's hard to find people who are passionate about networking too, so I admire that.
Yeah. Well, and that's, to be honest, I mean, when we found Allyn many years ago as well, it was hard to find some people that were passionate about storage, and that is Allyn's specialty as well. And they're
trying to get rid of him ever since. Yep.
He just keeps showing up, and the Skype calls just keep on coming in. So we actually gave a gold award to the RT-N66U router, and to the which one down here, the USB N66 dual band wireless USB adapter that kind of looks like a spaceship. Or is that LAX that has that weird structure out in the middle of it? It does kind of look like that weird structure outside LAX. So I encourage you guys to go to pcper.com, check out this review, because both Chris and I are soliciting feedback on the style that we use, the testing that we used. We look at best case scenario where the two devices are 3 feet apart, a normal scenario where they're a couple of rooms apart, and a torture test where they're far apart and there are many, many walls separating the adapter and the router and that kind of stuff. So if you guys have any suggestions, go to the article, leave your comments. You don't even have to be registered to do that. So interesting stuff. Do you guys, Linus, do you guys do a lot of the networking stuff on the Tech Tips channel?
I've tried in the past. There are some challenges associated with it. So number one is that there are just shed loads of wireless networks around our filming studio. Not to mention the microwaves that people are constantly using, and whatever the heck is on the other side of one of our walls. There's tons of interference, to the point where when I first tried to do my 802.11n versus G comparison, I couldn't get the N solutions to perform at higher than around 12 kilobytes per second for throughput that I was actually measuring. So it's very difficult for me to film anything to do with wireless. I have played around with a couple things in the past. When ASUS's transformer, whichever one it was that had the shoddy wireless at first, was it the Prime?
The first transformer. Yeah.
Anyway, when that one got released, I actually did kind of a fun little test where I turned it into a tour of my house, where I took 2 different tablets with a variety of different routers and tested them in a variety of different places. And then I ended up pulling that video down because ASUS didn't really want me to talk about their inferior reception.
Yeah, but they changed the design after that, right? They changed the back of it. Actually, we'll talk about this a little bit later. This is the VivoTab RT. This is the Windows RT tablet. And this part is plastic. And I'm willing to bet $1 million that this is where all those radios reside as well. So
that's right. So I had a very early sample of that one, and they basically were like, yeah, we'd prefer if you didn't talk about that early sample because it's fixed now. It's okay. And I was like, oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So for the next little bit, we're going to talk about AMD, both the GPU and CPU side. First up on the GPU side, AMD, in a combination of things, kind of went with this never settle campaign. And the first thing we'll talk about is a new driver. So they came out with a 12.11 beta driver that offers substantial performance improvements on, is it Southern Islands? Which one is the most recent, Josh? Is that Southern?
Yes.
Southern Island. So the HD 7000 series of GPUs, you're seeing some significant performance improvements. So they gave us a couple of days early to kind of beta test all this stuff and see what performance we could find in there. I mean, they were claiming, up to 20% in games like Battlefield 3 and the new Medal of Honor that uses the Frostbite 2 engine. So we were both curious and skeptical on that kind of stuff. So what's interesting is what we decided to do, just for a quick sanity check on it, is we retested the 7870 gigahertz edition, both at the 12.9 and the 12.11 driver. And we compared it to the GTX 660 Ti and kind of unfairly the 670. That's kind of way outside its price range. Because the 7870 is $239 and the GTX 660 Ti is $299. So we were curious to see if this new driver would kind of marginalize those performance differences. So in Battlefield 3, which is the game that gets the most attention right off the bat, you'll see here, if you look at the bottom of the graph, you'll see the 12.9 followed by a 12.11. So the 12.11 driver is the bottommost score, and we see an increase from 55 to 63. And what's important to note is the 660 Ti sits at 65. So we went from a fairly sizable deficit to a fairly close result. And if we go here to 1080p, you'll again see us jump from 48 to 55 frame rate, and again it closes that gap, and then it actually closes it quite a bit at 2560 by 1600, which you could equate this to those 27-inch panels as well at 2560 by 1440, and you can see that it does make a difference. Now we did have a bug. If you look at this screenshot, maybe this one is the better one. You'll notice that there's some stuff missing, like all of the geometry. And every once in a while when we were doing our benchmark run, this is what we would get. And they actually, to be completely fair, AMD told me about this bug before we did our testing. So they said, hey, look, if you happen to test in a handful of levels in Battlefield 3, we've seen this, and it happens to be one of the ones that we use in our benchmarking session.
Yeah, but look at the HDR on
nice.
that scene.
Yeah.
It is nice.
So pretty.
The lighting...
They're taking the buildings out of the way so you can see the lighting effects.
Exactly.
I just equated it to wall hacks, back in the Quake days and that kind of stuff. But when we did run it, when we did not have... all these benchmark scores came from runs that did not have those obvious glaring missing geometry totals. It did pretty well. So let's take another game just to see, like Batman Arkham City. And I think here you'll also see pretty sizable gains. We jump from 74 to 89. At 1080p, we go from 65 to 79. And at 2560, we go from 38 to 47. So again, 20% gains, 23% at 2560 by 1600. That's pretty impressive stuff to get out of just a driver. Now, before we move on to the game bundles and stuff, Josh, how do we explain this? How do we explain that they didn't find some way to cheat, that they didn't, they're not shader replacing in the driver or something like that? I didn't test it, but I know Nate at Legit Reviews tested it, renamed a couple of the executable files to make sure that those performance adjustments still showed up, right? And they did. So they don't appear to be doing any cheating, but it seems like since the card's released in January, the GPU family's released in January, that it's taken an awful long time to finally get this performance jump in the architecture.
This is, it's not unprecedented. Do you remember some years back when the GeForce 3 was released, and about 9 or 10 months later, we got the first detonator series of drivers, which really increased the performance. And we're seeing the same thing. I mean, AMD has had the VLIW5 architecture for a long, long time. The you can actually trace it back down to the HD 2900 series is VLIW5, even though it only supported DirectX 9. No, 10. Yeah. Sorry. And now we have this, brand new architecture. It's still 10 months down the line from when it was first introduced, and yeah, it's a lot of driver work, and probably even more important, it's a lot of compiler work. I remember talking to Neil Trevett when he was still with the group that made PerMedia. Do you guys remember that 3D chip?
I no.
PerMedia.
No,
but
you're just older than
they
me.
had a highly programmable DX9. No, it was a DX8 base chip, and I was talking to him, and he said, "Hey, do you know any compiler guys looking for work?" And I was like, "No, why is that?" He's like, "Well, now that we're getting into these, fully programmable parts, driver efficiency is really going to be based on how efficient our real-time compiler is for these instructions going out. Because if you have, certain operations that go one after another, and you don't quite optimize that, then you're going to have, potentially bubbles in the computational." I'll just pretend I stream here because I just woke up from a nap. My wife was supposed to wake me up like an hour ago, and it was 5 minutes before the podcast, so I'm a little stoned.
It's okay.
Still waking up. But anyway,
but you're saying basically that it's you're saying basically that it's not unprecedented. It's not totally unexpected. To me, it just seemed late. That's all it was.
Yeah, well, if you look at the driver guys for AMD, you can say that they've had some issues in the past.
What do you mean,
year.
driver guy? Isn't there just one left now?
Terry? No, he moved on.
He moved on.
Like
Right, that guy's gone. So.
But yeah, they don't have quite the driver team that NVIDIA does, and so we saw it really a lot last year when Rage came out. They needed many days to have a workable driver, and it was not completely optimized. And then you had to have another driver if you wanted to play the Battlefield 3 beta. And they've kind of improved upon that, but still, they've got guys working on the new APUs, which are all a mix of VLIW5 and VLIW4 products. Now they've got the new Southern Islands architecture, or GCN, as we like to call it right now. So yeah,
all right.
It happens, but yeah, it's nice to see, and they're finally getting out these kind of performance-based drivers, because I mean they take literally months to test out certain situations on the architecture, on these GPUs, and to see which is the most efficient way to manage resources and get as many instructions out per second.
Okay. Well, it's interesting now because if you look at maybe how the 7870 gigahertz edition GPU has crept up then on the performance of the 660 Ti, and you consider that the 660 Ti is $299 and the 7870 gigahertz edition is $239, it makes that card much more compelling. And which kind of leads us right into our next story was, along with this driver, they actually announced a really sweet new bundle for the Radeon graphics cards. So the Never Settle game bundle is something where they're combining Medal of Honor Warfighter, Sleeping Dogs, Hitman Absolution, and Far Cry 3. Now, you don't get all of them with every card that you buy. Here's how it breaks down. If you buy an HD 7900 series card, 7950, 7970, 7990, oh, just kidding, you get Far Cry 3, Hitman Absolution, and Sleeping Dogs for free, and you get a 20% off code for the new Medal of Honor, which just came out this week. Right? So they're estimating $170 worth of games included. If you buy a single 7800 series card, like the 7870 gigahertz edition, you'll notice you'll get Far Cry 3 included and 20% off Medal of Honor. If you happen to buy a pair of 7870s, they'll add in Hitman Absolution. Yeah, so you can see that kind of matrix that they have that we've provided in our story. So my question, that's kind of a global question to everybody, is how much weight do you put on game bundles like this? I think if you consider the 7950 is what, $299 today, and you're in total kind of getting $170 in software included, that kind of, in theory, again, lowers the price of that GPU down to $129. Linus, is that something that you would consider or expect consumers to consider when buying their graphics cards?
My experience is that game bundles are a great way to sway a customer who is on the fence, but it does not seem to have much of an impact on the customer's ultimate decision to buy a graphics card, nor does it really have much of an impact on the customer who's already walked into the store or already loaded up the website knowing what they want. This comes from my experience as a retail sales guy here at NCIX, going all the way up to my current position as a category manager at NCIX. So I've seen these bundles executed by Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, basically you name it, and you go up and down the line. I mean, I've seen game bundles with as weak things as trial offers for games no one cares about, and as strong as AAA titles or multiple AAA titles onto a single product. And it's always held true. That same rule has always held true. Like a great example, actually, someone's talking in the chat about the Borderlands 2 bundle on 660 Ti, where 660 Ti sales were great out of the gate. It was fantastic GPU, well positioned, and the Borderlands 2 free game was awesome. However, once the Borderlands 2 game ran out, it's not like GTX 660 Ti sales fell off a cliff. So you have to look back and go, well, was this card doing really well because gamers were excited about its price to performance ratio and the way that it brought Kepler features to a new price point, or were they excited about the fact that it came with this game? And it's really hard to say because it's like this chicken and egg thing. You don't know which one came first.
It's almost like you do an exit poll or something like that, right?
Well, what about the old Orange Box bundle, huh?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I mean, how many people got really mad at ATI because Valve refused to deliver Half-Life 2 for a good year?
Wait, are you talking Orange Box or Black Box?
One of the
Half-Life 2 bundle, yeah.
Yes, I think you're thinking of Black Box because I bought an All-in-Wonder 9600 Pro with the promise that I would get the Black Box. Now, I ended up being a satisfied customer at the end of it because I got access to the Counter-Strike Source beta long before anyone else got access as a Black
but you probably
Box
work
owner.
at the store you bought it from.
I bought it from NCIX.
Of course,
I was a customer long before I worked there.
So yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to tell how much this really affects people, but Far Cry 3 is going to be a AAA title. Hitman Absolution, maybe not on the PC, but it's actually a really good title. And Sleeping Dogs is something that we've already seen as a bundle with AMD products as well. So I think you're right in that if there's somebody on the fence between like 670 and a 7970 or 7950, this may persuade them, but it really comes down to, do you like Far Cry 3 more or do you like Borderlands 2 more? Which game, is that? Or do you put value on Hitman and Sleeping Dogs and 20% off of Medal of Honor? So it's interesting. Either way, it's a very aggressive move by AMD in the GPU market that will go at least through the end of the year, according to what they're telling us. So let's move on to the next AMD topic. We're going to talk with Josh a little bit here.
Do we really have to?
We don't have to, but I want to for just a little bit. We don't have to talk a whole lot, and I think based on time constraints, maybe we shouldn't talk about it a whole lot. But it's something we've been previewing for a while, and that is the final the release of the FX 8350, 6300. That's what we reviewed. But the Vishera pile driver desktop non-APU processors. Was that a long enough description of the parts?
Yes.
Okay.
Potentially.
Yeah. So tell me about it.
Did you do all that in one, breath of air?
I don't.
It would be much more impressive,
We'll
in
check the
fact,
tape.
if you did. Anyway. Let me reach down here and see what the heck we got going on.
Please
We've been
pull up a
talking about
processor.
pile driver for a long time, and is somebody, near the ocean? I swear I hear this,
I don't hear any of it.
I have a lingering cold, so it's possible it's my breathing, and I'm very sorry.
It's like listening to a seashell, maybe.
Exactly, and it's kind of like, making me want to fall asleep because I'm next to the seashore and I expect to hear some, albatrosses, gah, gah, in the background. But no, instead we get to talk about AMD Vishera. Like I said, we've been talking about pile driver for a long time. It is the updated architecture from Bulldozer.
Yep.
It's promised many fixes in both IPC and TDPs. And we originally saw this product with Trinity. And Trinity was, of course, the APU. It was 2 pile driver modules attached to the VLIW4 GPU. And they called that the APU. The things that we learned from that was it was a little bit faster in Llano. It had pretty decent thermal characteristics. And when I compared a 3.8 gigahertz Trinity A10 to the older FX 4170, they came neck and neck to each other in terms of performance. So that kind of promised that things would be looking a little bit better for Vishera because they add in another 8 megs of L3 cache, which should improve performance. Now, I don't have the 8350 because that is still in a machine that I'm going to be doing some work on. Mm-hmm. But these were my weekend project with, several chips. And if you kind of look behind me in my video, let's see if I can get out of the way.
Yeah, okay. I see boxes.
There's a blue stack of things back there.
Sure.
Right below the picture. Those are all AMD processors. And this is just a group of which I reviewed against. I took a look at the older FX 6200. Not Ryan, but Ken was able to provide me with 8150 results, had an X6 1100T, and then, of course, the FX 6300 and the FX 8350. The FX 6300 was kind of interesting in that it was clocked at 3.5 gigahertz. The older FX 6200 was clocked at 3.8 gigahertz. And in overall terms of performance, they were neck and neck. The FX 6300 kind of came out ahead in most real-world applications. So, the promise of pile driver is there. It's just not as extreme as we were hoping.
Sure.
So the main push of this is that they fixed the thermals, they improved on IPC. So instead of having a product like the FX 6200, which is a 125 watt TDP part, we now have the FX 6300, which is slightly faster and is only a 95 watt TDP. With the 8350, they took that the opposite direction. They kept it 125 watt TDP part, but they increased the clock speed by 400 megahertz, so it runs at 4 gigahertz and 4.2 gigahertz turbo. And in terms of performance, it performed finally how we were kind of expecting the architecture to be. This I think overall should have been a product that was released last year. It would have been much more competitive. It would have probably been worth the price of $285, which the original FX 8150 was delivered at. And at that time, the competition was the 2500K and the 2600K, and I guess the 2700K was out by about then.
Right.
Overall performance, it's now, I guess you'd consider it a competent part for its price point. Now, these are much cheaper, supposedly, and the FX 8350 is a $195 part, and that is, a long ways from the $280 or so that the original was released at. It comes in under price from the 3570K from Intel. Mm-hmm. In highly threaded applications, it not only competes well with that particular part, in some of them it actually outperforms it. But it really still can't touch, except for 7-zip, the 3770K, which of course is a 8-thread product. It's 4 cores, 8 threads, hyper-threading.
Right.
And that particular processor is just a monster, and it's only 77 watt TDP. So AMD still has some issues because you're using a lot more power, even though in the end you kind of consider it, hey, I turned on this 30-watt light bulb behind me, so now my electricity is
balanced out.
Insane. What's Allyn doing?
No, nothing. I was agree with you. When you turn on a 30-watt bulb and it balances out your power consumption, it's not as big a deal as people make it out to be.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, if you have 2 small children, then stuff's left on all the time. So you could have like a 350-watt processor and not really notice a difference.
So what would you recommend this part? Go ahead, Linus.
I would make the opposite argument there, where I would say that for a single PC household, that might not matter. However, my household has at least a half a dozen PCs going at any given time. And so if we're talking an extra 30 watts per PC, and if everyone gets careless about performance per watt, then we're looking at a completely different beast. And while energy is actually cheap where I live in British Columbia, there are parts of the world, parts of North America, where it costs 2x, 3x what it does for me to run computers, and it does start to add up. So devil's advocate, done.
So, Josh, would you recommend these parts for any particular group? I hate falling back on the if you're a fan of AMD kind of answer, right? Mm-hmm. But do they offer compelling performance for a gaming system? They're obviously not going to be great for single-threaded workloads, right? That's still not its strong suit, to say the least.
Yeah, for gaming, it's okay. It's better than any other AMD product before. There is more, thermal headroom to take it up higher speeds, and that, of course, does increase performance. But I think that the area that it really shines is in the stuff that is really heavily multi-threaded. Video encoding really does very well on this product as compared to what Intel offers. I'm going to be very curious what happens when PileDriver goes to the Opteron, because there are enough enhancements throughout the design that in some of those workloads, it's going to probably show some significant differences in overall performance. Now, I know that Scott is a competitor for pcper, but he does the inside the second testing, and there were some significant improvements
nice.
That kind of landed this product in Intel performance in terms of overall latency and delivering stuff not only fast but also consistently without these big gaps of time in between the data being delivered to whatever application is asking for it. So
okay,
there are areas where it does shine, and even against Intel, it does very, very well. But again, you're looking at, on the Intel side, with Ivy Bridge, 77-watt parts, and this is a 125-watt part. You do need better cooling. And as I go into, you want me to go into overclocking?
Nah, we put that in the article. We'll have people.
Okay.
We'll tease it. Go read Josh's article. It's actually really well. I know I sound surprised, don't I?
Yes, because my work is usual crap.
Well, usually you're right. Like you're talking
process a
today.
review out of you for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he has a lot more details in the review on the website. The overclocking, of course. You got up to like what 4.8 gigahertz or something like that.
4.6 with pretty crappy air cooling.
Okay, so there you go. All right. Not going to hit the 5 gigahertz barrier, but the full review is up there. Now you know everything's kind of laid out. We know we don't have any surprises anymore, any more mystery.
But as a preview, this came in today.
Oh, the
and
LCS.
this will be the liquid cooling system that AMD provides with the processors if you get that bundle.
Gotcha.
And apparently this thing is quite beefy. It's heavy, and it's got LED lights that you can program.
Ooh.
Mine didn't work.
Does it come with an albatross?
But, is the albatross alive or dead? Because you're talking either good luck or an anchor.
Food. Albatross. I've got some nice albatross.
Oh, I thought you were, talking about the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and I was going to be impressed by your
No, I was going low
literary...
We don't do literary references on this podcast.
No.
I'm sorry. All right, we're going to touch on some news items real quick here, but first, before we do that, we will want to thank our sponsor of the podcast, MSI, and Alex has a message for us.
The all-new Z77 M-Power mainboard from MSI is poised to change the overclocking game. Every Z77 M-Power board will have a factory 24-hour military-class burn-in test completed before shipping. Additionally, performance-optimized features such as Go-To BIOS, Multi-BIOS 2, V-checkpoints, Bluetooth 3.0, and onboard Wi-Fi allow users convenience and total system control over their overclocking and gaming experience. This is the new endurance champion, Z77 M-Power from MSI.
There you go. All right.
Tell Alex next time he should just give you guys my video, because my video on the M-Power is way better.
We can do that. I'll tell him. He can send whatever video along that he wants to. What item did we have in our show notes next? Because I think I have these out of order. Oh, we do have it. The Apple Fusion Drive. We're going to wake up Allyn.
Wake up, Allyn.
Allyn, you awake?
Hi.
Allyn, okay.
Stop eating the cheesecake.
So this week we saw a bunch of announcements from Apple. We don't really talk about most of that kind of stuff on there. They announced really cool looking... are they still called iMacs? I guess they are iMacs, right?
Yeah.
It just sounds out of date now. Really cool looking iMacs, an iPad mini that they said they would never make, and an updated iPad 3. All that being said, they also introduced something they called the Apple Fusion Drive. And that's almost all that they said, except there was a combo of SSD and hard drive. So, Allyn, you did a little bit of research on this. Tell us what this is and maybe how it might interest PC users.
Yeah, during the Apple event, they sort of went into some detail about it, and they showed a couple of graphics, and it looked sort of like another hybrid kind of solution, but
Right.
upon further digging, it's not hybrid at all, actually.
No.
It's just a convenient way of logically connecting two hard drives, or, well, two storage devices, I should say, because the new iMac and the new Mac Mini, they actually can have two serial ATA connected devices internally.
So it's JBOD.
Sort of. It's JBOD, just a bunch of drives, but each one has their own partition and file system. So what ends up happening is the OS combines them, but there's file structure on each one.
Huh.
So it's actually doing it at the file level. It's not just striping based on number of sectors or anything like that. And you get all of the space combined of both drives. So the partition on the SSD and the partition on the hard drive, that's your total space. So it's not a mirror. Stuff is not duplicated for the most part.
Right.
I imagine the only time it's duplicated is if it's in the middle of moving stuff back and forth. So the way this works is, let's just call it the C drive for the sake of whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
That's where OS X gets installed. That's where all of the core apps, all the initial stuff that gets put on the system, that's where it all goes. Anything that you're writing to the system in general, it all goes there first. And then what happens is OS X in the background moves stuff off of that to make sure that there's enough, I guess just empty space, just available space for subsequent times that you were going to just dump a bunch of stuff on the drive.
Okay.
But it gets shifted in the background over to the hard disk. which has its own file system. And it's probably just a parallel. Like if you were to look at both of them individually, it probably looks like the same kind of file structure, except some files are in one place and some files are in the other. And what ends up happening is OS 10 can do that with the apps, and it could do that with just the whatever your large media, just stuff that's sitting on the system. So it just sort of has like this intelligence to it that figures out, okay, he's not using this app, he's using these other apps all the time, and it'll put the more frequently used stuff on the SSD, the less frequently used stuff on the hard drive.
Do you like this better than Intel's technology that does mirror stuff?
Yes, I do. Much better. And my standpoint on that is from the aspect of recovery. Because if this works the way that they say it does, and there's even an entry right on the Apple support page that talks about Fusion Drive that says that you can actually mount like the hard drive separately to another OS 10 install. So what that tells me is, this is like, okay, so say something fails, you could probably take either the SSD or the hard drive, and you're in disaster recovery mode. You're just like, whatever I can get off of this, I didn't have a backup, let me see what I can get. Whatever the other drive is going to have a file system. It's not just going to have fragments of pieces of files that, like the Intel rapid storage technology, it's not doing things at the file level. It's doing things at the sector level. So it'll,
This is almost closer to what someone like Microsoft was trying to do with Drive Pool on Windows Home Server, except instead of using this mapping for duplication, it's using it for performance improvements.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. The stuff you want more frequently on it's basically what. That little mantra thing we talk about, like if a person wants to use a solid-state drive and then they take their old big hard drive and they make that their spare data and they install the OS to, and you have to make it so that your download folder is on the hard drive and your other, and put your big files on the hard drive. This is the exact same thing, except it's just managed by OS 10 and you don't have to think about it.
I wonder if they'll have any kind of like customization, like where you say, I always want this set of data on the SSD.
I doubt it. It's Apple.
I doubt it. It's Apple. Yeah, but they do say that all the OS 10 stuff, like the OS specific stuff, all stays on the solid state, which is smart, right? And then it from what I can tell, they can shift the apps back and forth, and they can shift the any other kind of just individual files sitting on the drive.
It does have an Appletonian taste to it, does it not? We know what you want best for performance. Don't worry about it. And maybe they do.
Honestly, I think this might get it right enough of the time to not, for you to not have to worry about it. And
so is this just going to be a constant HD usage all the time, even when you're resting? It's moving stuff around how it wants to make it better.
Well, no, it wouldn't be
quotation
constant.
marks.
I mean, if it wanted to move something, it would just do it, and then it would be done. It wouldn't take very long.
And Seagate's thing about the whole hybrid drive paradigm is that they've actually found it reduces the overall load on the disk itself by moving the things around once and then having them sit there. And in Seagate's case, they're using a very, very small cache, whereas Apple has implemented what I would consider to be a very appropriate size cache of around the size of your commonly used applications in your OS. I think it's pretty smart.
And you can always, if you are a power user and you want that kind of level of control, you can always just not use the Fusion drive. I would imagine you can disable it, blow away your install, redo the install with the drives not paired together like that.
Maybe?
Because you can get into disk utility. What is it? You have to hit like Apple something when you boot up, and you can get into like recovery, the little recovery environment.
Yeah.
You hit a Command Option R when you're starting up. And then you can get in there, and then you can always you could probably break that volume into the two individual drives, I would imagine, and then just redo your OS 10 install that way, and just put it on the solid state, and then you could just, you should be able to pretend.
I don't know. It seems doubtful, especially when they say you're only allowed one more partition.
Well, no, that's only if you already have Fusion going.
Yes, they're going to fight you trying to make Fusion into a partition because they're already obviously sitting at that level of driver.
Well, no, I mean, that's the thing. You can blow the whole thing away, in theory, and redo an install on only the solid-state drive. That should be possible with the way, from what I understand of this. And there's actually a bottom section of that support page talks about if the Fusion volume was, like, corrupted for some reason and you went in there and wanted to, like, reinitialize it,
Right.
So they're talking about that, but I would imagine that in that same place, you could probably just break the logical link, and then you just have your 2 drives. That's a guess, but it's probably pretty likely. And then once you did that, you can just be like a power user all you want and just have your 2 individual drives and put stuff wherever you want them.
We'll
right?
see. I'm sure as these platforms kind of come out, we'll see this maybe explored and tested some too. So we'll have to see. It's interesting. Allyn just posted up his kind of analysis based on solely on information that Apple's released and on their support side as well. So that's still on the homepage at pcper.com if you want to check that out.
Most important point on this, if the large disk fails, like your hard disk fails in this configuration, the theory is that you're still being OS 10 and it'll still be running just fine. You just won't have access to the apps and the files that were shifted to the hard disk.
That aren't on the solid state drive.
Right. The whole OS environment should be there.
Yeah, but
that is not the case with any caching solution.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I gotcha. But okay. But it is the same as if you just actually have 2 separate drives and you install your OS on the solid
yes.
state. But then you have
what happens if the solid state drive dies?
Then all of your big files that were on the hard drive is probably all you're going to get.
But you don't have an
Josh,
OS.
it won't matter because there'll be a new one out, and everyone's going to want the new one.
You mean those people who bought the iPad 3 generation 5 months ago are trying to pawn their current ones off so they can get
Josh.
the 4th generation?
Hey Josh, I have an
Hey, what?
You want to buy an iPad?
I have one too. You want to buy it?
An iPad.
Don't. It's going to be a Zune that has iPad written on it.
I could do that. All right. Let's shift away from that, and we'll bring in Jeremy and talk about a little bit of bad AMD news. They announced I think we talked about a couple weeks ago. They rumored workforce cut, and now they officially announced a 15% cut. Real quick, Jeremy, any thoughts on this?
Well, it's definitely not good news, but then again, it's not as bad as what they were saying because the original was pegged between 10 to 30%, and at 30%, that would have been a real cut.
Like maybe twice as
Essentially,
much.
what we're doing is finding out that their actual loss is going to be 150 million quarters or $150 million this quarter. That's non-general accounting practices, or about 20 cents per share. The total income was 1.27 billion, which was sort of at the low end of what the analysts were saying. So not great news, but balanced out by they're only going to be cutting 15%. And, essentially like we thought, the graphics people are going to be safe. The more interesting stuff that came out once the hard numbers were all fed was sort of the changes that Rory Reid is thinking about doing. He's said that, AMD is going to totally change its focus. They're going to stick more with server-side stuff, embedded cores, and even more system on a chip for not what we'd usually consider AMD in, but probably more what you consider ARM's territory to be. So point-of-sale stuff, cell phones, industrial computers, and that sort of a thing. Doesn't mention sort of our consumer level whatsoever. So on the other hand, one of the things about the system on a chips is one of the things that AMD is going to be loving over the coming years is the fact that they essentially are going to get money from every single next generation console being sold. Sony PS4 has both a CPU and a GPU by AMD. The Wii U is going to have an AMD GPU, and whatever the hell Microsoft decides to call the next Xbox is, for all intents and purposes, going to have AMD silicon in it as well. And the nice thing about selling consoles is that you develop the chip, you put the chip into production, and then you sell it for the next 5-10 years. You don't have to change anything. The only thing you can do is add optimization to the line. So every time you make a chip, it gets a little bit cheaper to make and cheaper to make.
It's even simpler than that, actually, because in all of these next generation products, AMD is actually licensed the design to them. So Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, they are all in charge of actually producing the chip. So if you get any kind of bumps in the supply line, it doesn't matter because you're just getting in the royalties from these chips. So it's essentially you develop it, they pay you to develop it, you sell them that, and then you get royalties in, and that's just kind of, free money.
Yeah.
Because you have no liability whatsoever. Just ask, NVIDIA how much fun it was dealing with Microsoft and vice versa with the original Xbox.
Yeah.
My
Which could be
understanding
why
is the
they're not
royalties are a
licensing
lot
out their
smaller this
Tegra
generation,
parts.
So as much as they are going to be collecting the royalties, and that's good and that's cool, along with that reduced role that they're playing, I think there's a significantly reduced amount of actual money that they're bringing in from it.
Well, it kind of depends, because look how long this generation of consoles has been out. Microsoft has gone back to AMD, well, ATI, and whenever they've done these process shrinks, they've had to go back to the original design teams to get more information from, to help them out with this. So that's, money as well. I mean, we saw the Xbox 360 go from what, 90? Was it 130 nanometer at first?
90.
Yeah, I think so.
I think Ken says 90, or maybe it could have. It might have been.
I think it went down to about 90.
I think it was 90. It was 90, then it hit 65, and now I think that they've got the 40 nanometer or 45 nanometer.
Right.
It's 45 nanometer right now. That's the latest model. So yeah, they've done 3 process shrinks. Well, 2 process shrinks after the original, and again, this is they've been sending more money to AMD and ATI to be able to enable these kind of changes.
Interesting. So maybe good news for AMD there. Not good news. Lose 15%. So
it's not going to make them competitive, and it's going to stay away from what we care about.
Right. Right.
All of this should have been obvious as soon as we saw the expected MSRPs of the FX chips. I mean, I know a lot of the reviews are very positive, but from more of a business perspective, you look at it and you go, okay, well, their top-end chip is $200. Think about that compared to where an Intel high run rate for in the channel anyway, sort of the consumer channel, a high run rate chip is well over $200, getting into $300 territory.
I think
it's
maybe
not like. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's maybe even more pertinent to look at it if you look into the server and workstation world. You compare what the top-end Opteron part is. I think that's like $500.
Yes.
Versus with the top-end Xeon part, which is probably $1,500 or $1,800.
I think there's some over $2,000.
Are there? Okay. Because I know this because I was looking for this very machine earlier. But
yeah. So you talk to any chip maker, and they'll tell you about how the consumer-grade stuff is great, and it drives up revenue, and it's fantastic, but the enterprise-level stuff is where they actually make the money. So you look at AMD's pricing structure, and their enterprise level workstation grade products are priced similarly to Intel's consumer grade stuff. That should tell you everything you need to know about the margin structure.
That explains why the cost cutting is so necessary for them.
Yes.
So we had a Gigabyte motherboard story in there. We're gonna skip through that and talk about the last couple of things. Obviously, the big push this week is Windows 8. The big push from now to the end of the year is going to be new Ultrabooks, laptops, PCs, touchscreen laptops, tablets, phablets, folding laptops, whatever you can name. One of the ones in particular that came out this week, the reviews went up, was the ASUS VivoTab RT tablet. We got one of these in literally an hour before the NDA, so instead of doing a review, we just did like a live video stream of it. It went pretty well. So what we have here is our ASUS VivoTab RT using Windows RT. This is an NVIDIA Tegra 3 processor. It's really hard for me to operate looking this direction at the screen, but you can see.
That's pretty, though.
This is probably.
If only there was one with a screen on the back too.
That's a brilliant idea. Let me tell you about the ASUS TaiChi. No, so this is the RT, and I got to tell you, I've only had it. What did we got yesterday? I've been using it. I've been trying to use it in kind of my daily workflow of things. With
did all your troubles seem so far away? Now you've got to go and run away.
I wish there was a beer near me, though.
Damn it.
So far, I actually, this is like my first experience with the operating system, the RT operating system, which is the ARM-based non-x86 application version of it. And I have to say, I'm fairly impressed. It's hard to have a final judgment because if you go to the only way you can get apps now is through the store, which I'm sure will make Jeremy super excited. Right, so we open up the store here, and what you'll see is there's just not a whole lot of applications, and some of the ones that you would really expect, like there's no Facebook app yet, there's no official Twitter app, there's no I don't know what else I'm forgetting, but all the things that you do on your phone, your tablet, they pretty much don't exist here yet, and they probably won't until like the 26th. When the official release is. Apparently that's where they're going to open the floodgates on the applications and stuff.
But there's Fruit Ninja.
There is there? I don't know. Is that?
I don't
okay.
know. You scrolled past it.
Yeah.
Did I? Okay.
No, there is
All
Fruit Ninja.
All right. So like so far, I installed the Reddit application, a Newegg application. Xbox Smart Glass was kind of cool. We used Xbox Smart Glass to watch videos and play music, and hopefully not get our YouTube videos taken down from it. But like, say for example, you wanted to run which one to run? Where is it? Is it Resource Monitor? Yeah, so here, if you can run Resource Monitors. Windows RT, it's running on a Tegra 3. It's really hard to see with the camera there, but it's your standard Windows Resource Monitor. You know, it's got the Office 2013 RT edition, so I can write my Word documents and do my Excel numbers and make my presentations. And what does OneNote do? I don't even know what OneNote.
It just uses up system resources.
Oh, okay. All right, great.
Free with every Office install.
Go ahead, Linus.
Huh? No, I was just on my phone.
Oh, okay. I thought you said something. You know, the browser is great. Email's working. I was actually pleasantly surprised because I am an Android user, Android tablets, Android phones. But when I put in my Gmail account, email registered, contacts registered, calendar registered, all that kind of stuff worked fairly easily. If you look at the pictures on the site, you can get an idea there. It does have a keyboard dock. And despite some confusion on our live stream, it is going to be $599 for the tablet and the dock, the 32 gig version of the tablet and the dock that basically matches the price of the Microsoft Surface, which should be out a little bit later as well. So, you know,
So what does the screen look like on that monster?
It's 1366 by 768, and I would say it looks pretty good. I mean, it's an SIPS plus screen, 1366 by 768. So, I mean, you know, if you get up real close, yeah, you can see pixelation. It doesn't look like the iPad 3. It's not super sharp like that. But, you know, if you hold it at a reading distance, it looks good. The colors are nice. The colors are bright. It's high reflectivity, of course, so I'm looking back at myself almost the whole time. But I don't know, again, because we don't have our close-up camera functioning for this.
Does it blend?
I don't know. I'll let you know tomorrow. I'm bringing the blender in there. So, I mean, it loads PC perspective just fine. You can't tell from this screenshot. We'll have. I'm working on a review. We're figuring out how we're going to test all this kind of stuff. I guess I could go to pcper.com/live on it and see if that works. Let's see if that breaks everything.
So, in your personal
stream's
opinion,
down.
how do you like going to a more tablet-oriented computing type
I don't know. I don't think.
environment?
Yeah. Yeah. See, it did work. But I don't think this really counts as that yet. So it's still a tablet first and a productivity device second, in my opinion. It has a keyboard, it has a dock, and I can type on it. It's not great. It's a 10-inch device. I mean, it's hard to have a really great keyboard and touchpad experience on a 10-inch device. But I was writing out emails, all the stuff in our campfire chat that we were doing the last couple of days. A lot of it has been from this. It's been functional, and it has, I think, even tested battery life with the combination of the dock and the tablet is over 14 hours, like 14 hours and 40 minutes. So I'm really looking forward to like going on a trip and trying to take this as the sole device and seeing what I can and can't do. But the problem for any Windows RT device at this point is all about software, right? The iOS ecosystem is great. The Android ecosystem is great. The Windows Phone ecosystem is okay-ish, right? And this is a completely new platform. And so it all depends on what developers are able to do with these devices, whether or not it will be successful. Because
Successful is what? What's it for?
but
can it run 5 Skype streams at the same time?
I bet if I asked NVIDIA, they would say yes, but I don't think that is no.
Does it even have
He's going to
Skype
throw
on
it
it?
out the
You
window.
can't say that.
Is there Skype
Oh,
on
it'll
it?
have to. They own Skype now.
Yeah, Skype. Yeah, Skype will be out for it. I don't know if it is yet. I can search here real quick. Linus, you were going to say something? Do you have any,
I was
thoughts or
just gonna
experience
say,
on this stuff?
The one thing that I'm a little bit disappointed about with the whole Windows RT thing is I wish that they were able to Yeah, I don't even know. I guess what I'm more excited about is the Windows 8 tablets running on an x86 architecture, because then I don't care nearly as much about the lack of a Twitter app or the lack of the lack of any applications.
Yeah, AMD might be asking you to do some PR for them here later on.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah, I don't know. It all depends on what apps, what the apps are. I'll be curious. So like Intel's big. The competitor to this is going to be Clover Trail based products. So the idea of Clover Trail, in theory, I just installed the Skype app, by the way.
As compared to Cedar Mill. Wait, or is that Cedar Trail?
Cedar Trail.
Damn it, Trail.
Cedar Trail. So the idea with Clover Trail is that you can get devices that are this thin, you can get devices that are this size with similar battery life, but have the ability to run all the x86 applications that you cannot run on the Windows RT devices. That's all great to claim. They've claimed that for a long time on their Atom products. It needs to be proven still for that. The advantage this has is going to be, battery life, that kind of stuff, portability and usability in that regard. But
my iPad 2 already does that.
Yes, that is true. I consider this a very different. I consider with this and the keyboard, I feel like even with the Windows RT, you'll be able to do more productive stuff. Let's say more of a content creation device as opposed to a content consumption device, which I still...
Can I play devil's advocate again and point out that that SkyDrive is outstanding in its current iteration, and if I'm just tethering my phone and using any device, I don't necessarily need a device that's natively runs Office and has an Office application on it, as long as I have an active internet connection with which with a tablet would be most of the time. I can use SkyDrive for all of my Excel, PowerPoint, and word processing needs.
Yeah, that's true. We had a discussion about this today because we were talking about Google Docs versus using a local application. Local application, just responsiveness, ease of use is still better than what you get with an extremely lightweight version of Google Docs. Maybe SkyDrive stuff is a little bit better, but I think I don't. At $599, it's not an easy sell. At maybe $399 or $499, it's a little bit more competitive, but I think. Microsoft Surface is coming out. If we're just looking strictly at the VivoTab RT, Microsoft Surface is coming out. It has a lot of buzz around it in terms of its styling and that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can see the video that we ran here.
And how much is like the latest transformer from ASUS, the highest end model?
It's about the same, maybe even $100 more.
Okay, here's what it comes down to for me. It's a volume game. People often ask me, here. Great example is when people are shopping for a motherboard, and don't worry, I'm gonna bring this around full circle. When people are shopping for a motherboard, they'll ask me, which one should I get? Should I get the ASRock Extreme 11, of which ASRock has probably produced like hundreds of, as opposed to, a P8 or rather P9X79. Pro or something like that, where it's a volume part. And my response is always, on a niche product, it will just by sheer law of how the world works, it will never get the time and attention that something super mainstream gets. So Windows 8, with its x86 environment, will always get way more attention than Windows RT will get, until the volume of Windows RT starts to catch up to the scale of the Windows 8 user base.
Right.
And then you compare that as well to the iOS environment and the Android environments, and you look at it and you go, okay, blah, 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 this would be great if only for the app support. Will they reach that critical mass where the volume of these ARM-powered Windows devices is high enough that it will get any kind of support, never mind even just third-party, to the point where Microsoft won't just give up on it at some point? I'm not saying they will. They probably won't, no matter what. They're betting the farm on this. But at that price point, will they ever be capable of achieving enough of a market share to make anyone even notice?
I think maybe one of the benefits and potential benefits that WinRT has is that, correct me if I'm wrong on this, if anybody thinks differently, but I believe this is the case. I'm not.
You're wrong!
Yes. All right, fine.
Totally.
An app that is developed strictly for the Metro interface on Windows 8 will run on Windows RT. You have to recompile it, but they are compatible. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
In theory.
I mean, not out of the box for sure. Maybe eventually.
Yeah, Scott says it should. Scott says that it should. Yeah, people in the chat room are saying that's the case. So if that is the case, people don't have to completely adopt Windows RT for Windows RT applications and software ecosystem to grow. All that people need to do is develop Metro-style apps, or whatever they're calling it now, right? Metro applications. If you develop a Metro application, it can run on both Windows 8 and on Windows RT. And in that case, Windows RT will be the beneficiary of the massive install base of Windows 8. If that pans out, then I think maybe it becomes more interesting, right? Because now, Apple's moving that way as well. I think you'll see in a couple of revisions applications that will work on both laptops as well as your iOS tablets and phones and that kind of stuff. That's clearly the direction they're going, and it's obvious now that that's kind of clear the direction that Windows is going with this as well.
Hey, from talking from a hardware perspective,
yeah.
Note how I used our name kind of
Good call.
there. Yeah. Are you basically saying that Microsoft is doing themselves a disservice in the long term by not taking a loss in the short term, especially when, hey, let's offer this tablet out. It's new. It doesn't have very many apps. Why are we charging a premium for it when, sure, we can eat $100 per unit, get it out there for $399 instead of having an extra $100 coming in for each one sold, but let's get them out there. I mean, we've kind of seen with the PS3. I think the Nook.
Consoles usually
I can't remember the other one.
Because you're going to piss off your vendors.
You eat that. I mean, your vendors break even or have a small margin, but you, as a company who is pushing this, I mean,
it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. Go ahead, Linus. Linus.
You tried. It's okay. I was just going to make the same point about Microsoft's traditional partners, who I think are already upset enough about the existence of Surface.
Yeah. I think
never
so.
mind if Microsoft decided to fund every Surface $100 in order to make it sell. Do
that guy
I
from Acer had a
necessarily think
totally
that would be the wrong
laid-back
move
response
to just,
to it.
Sorry, someone else was talking. Go ahead. I wasn't really going anywhere with that.
Oh, just a quick interjection that the CEO of Acer had a very laid-back reaction to the
Right.
Surface.
Yeah, he was very adamant and mad, to say the least. In case anybody didn't catch the sarcasm there in Jeremy's tone. I don't know. I don't know. I think there are a lot of players that want WinRT to be successful. Qualcomm wants them to be successful. TI maybe not so much anymore. NVIDIA obviously does, and who doesn't is Intel, right? I mean, Microsoft. Scott's going to have an editorial on pcper.com tomorrow, kind of talking about a theory in which Microsoft's true goal is to totally get rid of the open app ecosystem completely anyway and move into a controlled system, much like we see in iOS and that kind of stuff.
The walled garden, if you will. You need the secret key to get in the walled garden.
Again, no literary references on the podcast.
Sounds like a pretty hot garden.
Nice. Also, real quick, that we mentioned this, the Taichi. This is the, as Scott put it in our title, a perfect blend of Ultrabook, tablet, and uppercase, thanks to its naming scheme. This is the Windows 8 machine that has a screen on both sides. So when it's open and you're using it as a laptop, you just have your screen in front of you and a keyboard. When you close it, there's a tablet. Ta-da! And I don't know, maybe you'll be able to run both screens at the same time and mirror it. So somebody sitting across from you, and you can put a picture up of a middle finger or something sticking across, at a meeting, and see if you.
Yeah, but someone's going to be in the middle of a meeting, and they're going to be looking at porn or something, and they're going to accidentally leave both screens on, and it's going to be really embarrassing.
I predict
kind of that League of Legends player the other day who live streamed him watching porn and making sure that he was happy at the end.
Whoops! You got to be careful when you're doing live streaming.
Yes.
Unplug unplug the power from the computer completely.
Boy, these massively multiplayer games are just getting really odd.
Yeah. All right, we've got one more story we're going to talk about, and actually, Linus, I know I just saw you posted a video on this the other day. Corsair released the Carbide Series 200R chassis. This is interesting move for Corsair as they keep going down in price level, and now we're into a $59 US case,
yeah, it's
right?
cheap.
What'd you think? Here, I actually have your video kind of queued up here. So
Hey, it's me in a box. Look at that. That's with the pedophile smile. Oh man, it's actually kind of creepy watching.
It is.
someone else
Wow,
watching me.
that's horrific.
watching yourself and
internet.
listening to yourself is bad.
Yeah,
so.
isn't that a great T-shirt I'm wearing though? Like,
I like that.
the Corsair Pink Floyd shirt. It's awesome. This is my house, by the way.
They totally paid you off, dude. Oh, look, Corsair.
Oh, look, a
logo on the
screensaver on the
TV.
TV too.
My,
I know.
My house used to look like this, Linus, when my wife kicked me out. And now I have an office. I'm still married, but I have an office now.
So basically, my take on the 200R is kind of the same thing that I've said about every iteration of Corsair cases. Even something like the 650D, where it's a more premium case, is that Corsair is really smart about cheaping out on the right things. And cheaping out, I use it colloquially. Obviously, you can't say that, but where let's call it spending money on the right things.
Okay.
Because I've actually disassembled 650Ds a number of times in order to paint them. And I know we're not talking about the 650D, but all these principles apply to the 200R as well. And what I noticed about it as I took it apart, where I've taken apart a Silverstone TJ07 for painting before, and everything screws together, and even the parts you can't see are like phenomenally well designed, and they're like machined out of solid pieces of whatever. Whereas with the 650D, the whole thing is basically just a big flat sheet of metal that they took a stamp and went slap and then folded it all up into a case. And it's structurally sound enough, and they spent a lot of money on the front bezel making it look good, and they turn it into a premium case. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing what they've done here with smart manufacturing and very smart design. So 200R is another great example of taking a case that you kind of look at it and you go, yeah, besides using slightly thicker metal than what an OEM might, which is very important. So they've used thicker metal, and then they've spent a lot of money on designing, on the design aspects of it, so that it actually doesn't have to be that expensive to manufacture. So that's how they're able to hit these price points with cases that have features. I mean, one of the things that really irks me about some of the traditional case manufacturers is that they'll create a product stack based on how much they think the consumer will value it, rather than based on how much it actually costs to implement that
Right.
feature. So you'll have a case that doesn't have SSD mounts because, oh, it's an entry-level case. And you kind of look at it from a consumer standpoint, and you go, well, why not? It doesn't cost anything. You drill a couple holes on the motherboard tray. How hard is that?
Yeah.
And that's where Corsair has really set themselves apart from everyone else, because they use smart design, low cost materials compared to how good the finished product looks, and they implement things that don't cost anything. Cable management holes don't cost anything. So Corsair goes, okay, then give them 7, because it doesn't matter. And that's why they're going to win.
And
So what?
Go ahead.
I got to ask this question. I use the 300R for a lot of builds for my other job because, Ryan is so cheap and he doesn't pay me anything. And
Nope.
so I got to, go and whore myself out to other IT places. But anyway, I use the 300R all the time. What is the difference between that one, which is what, $79, versus this one, which kind of looks the same, has a different, front bezel, of course. But where did they get the cost savings from? I imagine that you were pretty familiar with the 300R as compared to, hopefully, the 200R. So what do you think?
Honestly, it looks to me like it's just little things here and there, little incremental things that they've done to save a couple bucks. Maybe there was something they were doing in that, and this is all speculation, okay?
Sure.
Maybe there was something they were doing in the 300R manufacturing process that some factory that was able to cost down it a little bit more wasn't able to do because they don't have the machinery for that, and so they were able to move the 200R to another factory that was able to help them save another $6 or whatever else the case may be. I mean, remember, when it comes to case manufacturing, being able to save 20 cents on one part of the process is like the be-all and end-all. And if you're able to do it sort of 5-10 times incrementally on a new case revision, then you're some kind of like wizard mastermind. And George, the guy who does cases at Corsair, is some kind of wizard mastermind based on the time that I've spent with him. And so it wouldn't surprise me if, even though, and again, see, that is what Corsair does so well, is they figure out how to cost it down without you actually ever even noticing they did it. So I'm sure he's found some way to maintain the structural integrity, maintain the good looks, maintain the good features, but actually make it cost less to manufacture. And then instead of trying to turn that around and say it's a high-end product like you'll see other guys do, he has passed that savings right along to the customer. And that's why Corsair, again, like I said before in my concluding statement, will win.
Kind of like what they do with their power supplies.
Yeah. I mean, Corsair really takes a different approach to things that I think a lot of component companies, and I really like their incremental steps into these different markets. When they went into power supplies, they did this. When they went into cooling, they did this. Started out with one part, figured out people liked it, figured out what people wanted to change, move. When the 800D was their first case, that was $470 or something like that. Like it was really steep price. But you see what I kind of call now like the Corsair DNA in a case, and how much of it has now filtered down into sub $100 chassis, and it's really impressive.
Well, it's great because, I mean, finally I've got someone who's competing with NZXT. Because I always go with the NZXT cases. They're reasonably well built. Yeah, they're dirt bloody cheap. Because frankly, I'm not a big fan of cases. As long as it can cool, as long as it can house all the components that I want, I'm happy. And for a while there, NZXT was the only sort of quality choice you had until Corsair started, making these lower numbered cases that have a much lower price, but at the same time, you can hardly tell that they've cheaped out on it in any way, shape, or form.
I'm still so pissed at Corsair from, moving away from the memory market, because obviously that is just a cash cow right now for anybody doing memory.
Can I sort of interject?
Yeah, of course.
Are you being verbally
I'm being
ironic?
very facetious because
okay,
Josh,
because there's no money in memory.
All right, so yeah, that's really cool. We've got one on the way here as well, so we're going to take a look at that. All right, so this is the part of the show now. We've wrapped up the news. It's a long show, but it's been a really good one. So let's go into our closing hardware software pick of the week section. This is where you just kind of pick apart at random, maybe something that came out recently. It doesn't have to be. Josh likes to pick things from about 15 years ago every once in a while.
Do you want me to get that? No, it's too late. Too late to get an old
it's
piece
too late.
of
Josh, can you get me that thing right there on that box? So my
Hey, Ken, pick up that thing on that box for me.
Before I get into this, my pick of the week is actually an interesting product. We have a video going up on tomorrow. This is a Lantronix print server. It's iOS specific, right? So get that out of the way right now. But you know how iOS devices have AirPrint functionality? Yeah, me neither, because nobody ever used it because you had to have a specific AirPrint enabled printer. So this little device for $95 will you hook it up to your network. If you have a network attached printer, wired or wireless, it automatically detects them and automatically allows you to start printing from it, like in about 30 seconds. Plug in the network cable, plug in the power, and as long as those printers are on the same network, it just works. So you can just pull up on your iPad or iPhone and print on video, print on a web page, whatever it is you want to do. If you have USB printers, you can plug them into the USB, acts as a print server. You can use a hub, and I think you can connect up to 5 printers to it on the home version of it. So it's actually a really cool little device. I don't use iOS very heavily, but there have been some instances where, browsing a web page on an iPad or in emails, like I just want to print this out and take it with me. Well, now I actually have to go to my computer and print it and all that other kind of deal. Now you can just hit the button and go. So if you're a heavy iOS user, this might be something worth considering. And then the other thing, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to bring it up. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the OCZ.
Don't you mean lady and
gentlemen?
Yeah.
The OCZ NIA, Neural Impulse Actuator. And so it's a USB device plugged into your computer, and then you had this cool thing that you wore on
Put it on your head. Put it on your
You
head.
wore it like that, okay? And now this will be the thumbnail to the podcast this week. And
wasn't that the same headband that girl wore in the in that Return to Endor in the mid '80s?
It looks like it, yeah.
So apparently now
Thanks for bringing back bad memories.
I can control. I can control. We're gonna play Unreal Tournament 2004 sometime in the future, and I'm gonna go against Scott, and I'm gonna raise my eyebrow and think really hard about stuff and shoot him that way. Can you believe
And
it?
this time, headshot will really mean something when Scott kills you.
People tried to sell this crap. You think about that for a second.
Hey! Are you taking Michael Schutte out to the woodshed and beating him up?
I would just like to say that I actually did use one of those, and I played Pong with it. And I posted this in the chat, but I used a Nia to find out if tinfoil hats actually do protect your thoughts from being read. And so I posted
tin or aluminum
that
foil?
video in the chat as well. But it turns out that the crazies wearing the tinfoil hats are actually right. It does prevent your brain signals from escaping.
Nice. I like it. So I'm going to wear this.
Use that in benchmarking motherboard somehow.
Yeah, it'd be nice not to have to type. I could just think the benchmark, and it would run. Anyway, moving on. Jeremy, you are next. Please. There we go.
Think harder. Faster. Harder.
All right.
What do you got?
The Counter Electronics High-Powered Microwave Advanced Missile Project. It's not quite a HERF gun, but it just sort of almost matches it. It's essentially a missile that they've designed which will send out really, really high-energy microwaves and will toast computers. High enough powered microwaves that now the interconnects have gone sparky and the magic smoke may or may not have been let out. But in the most part, it's just...
I think I look worried.
We've always
what?
had
If
sort
you
of this
destroy the
idea of the
computers in
high-energy
your
radio
workplace,
frequency.
They will never be able to come back and ask you to help them through the computerized phone system. So they got to go to your front door. So how are you saving anything there, Jeremy?
Because I can just kill the computers altogether. They're all shut off, and people are just going to sit there staring, trying to phone me, and not quite sure why the phone's going to work, so they'll try and message me. You know, it's just, I've always, since Charlie Strauss and a lot of the sci-fi authors have had the HERF gun, the high-energy radio frequency gun, where you point it, shoot, and kill electronic devices. It's just kind of nice to find out that, hey, we finally got to the point where this will actually exist. And before you bring up the point of, I'll build a Faraday cage and make it safe, there will be holes in the Faraday cage. There are things called HVAC systems. There are things called power conduits. There are crawl spaces, sewer piping. It's really hard to do that. So, hey, we are at the point now where we can zap building and kill all their computers, just like in the sci-fi novels and the movies.
Hey, I want to play part of this video that is in this post. I want you to watch this. So after this guy talks, there's going to be a bunch of computer screens, old CRTs. Look at the computer here. I'll start playing it.
If you turn up the volume,
hold on.
Sounds
hold on.
A little bit like Stan
Watch
Lee.
this computer right here where my cursor is moving. Watch that computer when they all go off.
Oh, the CD?
It spits out a CD. That's a pretty high-powered microwave.
Zap. Well, because it's actually creating a network. So it would have just connected the mechanical switch to start that moving.
Yeah.
And away it goes.
Interesting. All right. Who's next? Josh, you got something picked out?
Me. You know what? Now that AMD actually has some CPUs worth a damn, we can start recommending some motherboards again. The Crosshair 5 Formula Z is new ASUS high-end motherboard. It's only like $239.
Yep.
And you get a lot. Now, if you consider, well, that's kind of a high-priced product.
It is.
But if you think of the features it has as compared to the price of the processor and what you get on the Intel side, you're still coming out ahead. It's SLI, crossfire capable. It's got all kinds of fun and interesting things. We'll have a review out here for it sooner rather than later, unless, of course, the finger of God yet again strikes my family, and then it'll be sometime next June.
Don't be so uplifting to everybody else on the podcast.
Just call me Joe Walrath.
Nice. Allyn, what do you got for us?
So I use this thing all the time, and I don't think I've ever made it a pick, or I don't think any of us have ever made it a pick.
Never.
No.
No. So if you already have the codecs to play all your stuff on your system, which if you don't, well, I don't know. There's all kinds of different codec packs out there, so I'm not going to make that the pick.
Okay.
But if you just want something to use those codecs and be extremely low footprint, you could basically just run the executable. Like, you don't even have to have this thing installed. It's called Media Player Classic Home Cinema. So Media Player Classic started out as this thing that looked just like Windows Media Player, like the old school version from Windows
good
98,
version.
right?
Well,
Really
the old
small
version.
footprint interface, no stuff in your way, no flowery themes, none of that. It just plays the video, right? And I've noticed that as long as you have a good set of codecs installed, it's much smoother and it just works better, in my opinion, than VLC or anything else.
It's the
along those
Microsoft
lines.
Fat Bunny.
Yeah, so real easy, and the home cinema version is a little better if you're going to potentially install it on a home theater PC or whatnot. It gives you some more options for hotkeys and does a little on-screen display stuff, like when you hit play and pause and stuff like that, like little fit and finish polish kind of stuff. I think it's just a fork of the original Media Player Classic, which was also on SourceForge. So, yeah, it's good stuff, really tiny. Thing just works. I've used it for years.
Cool. All right, last but not least, Linus, did you end up coming up with a product to pick?
Yeah, I was going to go with the N-Gear calculator. This trusty calculator has actually served me well through many years of product management and calculating things. Actually, it's made mistakes at times that have resulted in price errors, which are great for NCIX customers. But in all seriousness, I'm going to go with another case. I know we discussed the 200R already,
Okay.
but I was sorry, who was it that was saying there were only two good case manufacturers, NZXT and Corsair?
Oh, that'd be me.
Okay, I take exception to that, and I would say that Fractal Design is another outstanding entrant
Well.
into the case manufacturer ring. No, they're not that cheap. However, they do have products that are super cheap, like the Core 1000, which is like a $29.99 or $34.99 MATX case that actually is very smartly designed.
Okay, that's cheap.
And then this one right here, the Define R4, has all of the sort of premium features that you'd see on something like a Corsair Obsidian 550D or on something like an Antec P280. In fact, I'd say even better, and the build quality of the new Revision 4 is actually better than the older Revision 3, and it's just incredibly smart. Fractal was the first one to figure out that people don't need 4 or 5 5.25-inch bays. The Define R2, which launched a couple of years back now, I guess, I was the first guy to bring it into North America. As a product manager here at NCIX, but it had 8 3.5-inch bays and only 2 5.25-inch bays. I was like, this is the smartest thing I've ever seen, because who cares about all these 5.25-inch bays? What are you going to do? Install 3 fan controllers and your HD DVD drive? No. So the way that they've approached this is the R4 adds 140mm fan support where they used to have 120s. They've added a couple SSD mounts to the motherboard tray, so you can fit a total of 2 SSDs and 8 hard drives, or 10 SSDs if you prefer. Very, very well-built case, very, very quiet, and not widely distributed in North America for the most part, but it is available at NCIX, and it is available at, well, that other e-tailer that starts with an N.
Well,
so
see,
it's
now
not
that's probably one of the reasons I never ran into it.
yeah, it's not like they're
Because
impossible to find.
I was always a devoted Anatech and Attic fan.
Well,
It's
there's
only
your problem.
recently that I've started going to you guys.
Yeah, it's because Attic went out of business.
Yeah, and so did Anatech.
Yeah, well...
Or Anatech's out of business. Attic's
yeah,
sort of still.
sorry, I meant Anatech. Whatever, I get them confused because they're both very small.
You Canadians are talking about companies I have no idea about.
Yeah, but we outnumber you.
Wait,
Or
what?
wait, no, Scott's not actually on the show,
Yeah,
so it
Scott's
is
not on
only
the show.
2 out of
It's 2
5.
Americans. It's 3 Americans, 2 Canadians.
Hey,
And
one fat
Fractal
American
Design, 3 cases.
and 2 somewhat skinny.
So that's 2 Americans, right?
Yeah.
So we're
No,
even.
5.
Nice. I like it. Nice. All right. So that is going to wrap up our show. For anybody that maybe this is the first time they've listened to us, you can find all of our podcasts at pcper.com/podcast. If you want to watch us live, we record on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. at pcper.com/live. That's 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Check our schedule at pcper.com. It's on the right-hand side. It'll give you an idea of when we're doing other interesting live things. And yeah, check that out. Linus, I want to thank you. It was a blast to have you on here. You're welcome back anytime. You have a lot of great hands-on knowledge. You touch more hardware than I think the rest of us combined.
Bad touch?
No, good
always
touch.
Bad touch.
But thank you, seriously, for
Ooh,
being
let
on the
me
show.
slide this bay in there a little. Never mind.
Yeah,
That's why you don't do case reviews, Josh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and the dust.
You just
I live in a
molested that
dusty
Western
environment.
Digital Blue Drive.
Ooh. Spin that platter harder, faster.
So tell us again, where can people find you if they want to watch your videos and your take on hardware?
I'm really hard to find. If you put Linus Tech Tips into a Google search, you probably won't get like thousands of hits. That'll lead you to me, and I'm of course being a little bit facetious here. So yeah, Linus Tech Tips in a YouTube search or a Google search, you'll definitely come to the right place.
Cool. Thanks again for being here. The rest of you guys, whatever. I see you all
Screw
the time
you.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
you
Thanks
too.
for showing up, I guess, Josh.
And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm
Good night,
Jeremy
everyone.
Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano with a speech impediment.
Today. Bye, guys.